Hello and welcome back to Saint Squad. I'm your host, Dylan Sanders, and today is the day that I win the national championship with LSU in NCAA Football 26. It comes out in a couple hours.
I'm Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints podcast, and while I think Kellen Moore has a shot at Coach of the Year, I think it's going to take a lot to get him in that conversation.
John Hendricks, NewOrleans.football, and Mama always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
This is former Saints wide receiver Lance Moore. And yes, the training camp scaries are a real thing.
It's the Saints Squad, sponsored by Gametime. Everything New Orleans Saints, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from down in the Big Easy, the way only Locked On Podcast Network can. Get ready and squad up. It's the Saints Squad show, starting now.
Howdy, United Nation, and welcome back to the Saints Squad, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen every Monday and Thursday. We have a unique group of experts here ready to bring you a fun and informative show on everything New Orleans Saints. Today, we're going to be going through stuff like a season preview for Quincy Riley, one of this show's favorite defensive backs. Who's going to lead the team in receiving touchdowns? What players should fans be rooting for in training camp this year? But we're going to start off with the head man in charge, the brand new head coach, Kellen Moore. Now, it might seem a little bit of a long shot to consider him a candidate for Coach of the Year, but if you think about the situation he's taking over with, new coaches in bad situations get a little bit of leeway in those kind of conversations, and it's not the last thing that could happen in the NFL season. So, John, why don't you start us off and talk us through what needs to happen for Kellen Moore to win Coach of the Year in his first season?
Well, the short answer is a lot. But on a serious note, I mean, you let's look and break it down. You know, you got to go from worst to first, right? So they got to win their division. I think that's paramount for Kellen Moore in his first year. I think if you can hover around 11 or 12 wins coming off of a 5-12 season, I think that puts you in the conversation. I think that puts you in a really good conversation to win Coach of the Year. Now, look, I think the way the Saints would win some of these games would also help too. And just if they can show a complete turnaround, maybe go on a run a little bit and maybe put an actual win streak together. I know that's kind of foreign for what Saints fans are used to, right, in the past. But, you know, again, not be this Jekyll Hyde team, be a team that can come in, be a little bit dominant, win some games in some different fashions. Maybe he is a big difference maker in those, you know, essentially saying, okay, the offense will dominate this week and the defense dominates one week. And then maybe it's Kellen Moore with some of his trickery, some of his different things that we haven't seen. I mean, this guy is very intelligent when it comes to coaching. And like, I mean, he'll be the first to admit he's a football nerd, right? Like, I mean, which one of us really isn't, but like, I mean, a little bit extra
Not me
when it comes to it. You know what I mean? Not Dylan. Well, how you gonna win? How you gonna win CAA if you ain't no football nerd? I'm just saying. But anyway,
Punting,
good
just
luck.
punting,
Yeah.
lots of punting.
Punt it, and stop defense. Good luck. But no, I just think that's the kind of turnaround that you need, is that you have to go from worst to first. You have to have probably 11 or 12 wins and just change the face of this franchise. I just feel like if you hit on either Spencer Rattler or Tyler Shough and they both have really good seasons, I think that is going to help you. I mean, it's kind of just like this cohesion for Kellen Moore, and it has to be a perfect storm. Respect to Marcus Colston, too. Quiet storm.
I'm going to go through the last couple of Coach of the Year winners. It was Kevin O'Connell in 2024, Kevin Stefanski in 2023, and Brian Daboll with the New York Giants in 2022. And I think that if you're thinking about Kellen Moore winning the Coach of the Year, you got to look at the Brian Daboll year. That was it was the surprise New York Giants. They were only 9-7-1. That is by far the most attainable, because I don't think the Saints are going to go 14-3 this year. That'll start actually a new headline. Dylan doesn't think the Saints are going to win 14 games in 2025. But I don't think it's entirely. The last time a Saints coach won Coach of the Year was shocker, Sean Payton in 2006.
Yeah.
But before that, it was Jim Mora back in 1980. Oh, in the 80s. 87, I think. But, I think you really do have to look back to the Brian Daboll way of winning. Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I think if you look at Coach of the Year, you get a lot of offensive coaches. That works in Kellen Moore's favor. That's kind of where it ends for me. I don't think that Kellen Moore is going to end up being in this conversation. Not this year. This is the beauty of Coach of the Year. You don't have to do it your first year as a head coach, right? Like you can build everything and then kind of get everything built the way that you want it and then potentially win it later on. This is, though, the biggest opportunity for him to have this turnaround, obviously, most quickly. But the thing that stands out to me, and if we're looking at like FanDuel, for instance, plus 6,000, so he's tied with guys like Mike Tomlin, Mike McDaniel, Brian Daboll, actually, and I think the other is Raheem Morris. So they're all kind of in that same group. They're at the 18th best odds, or not 18th best odds, but they're 18th, tied for 18th place, if you will, amongst those odds. No head coach of the year, as far as I can find it, has won Coach of the Year with a rookie quarterback. And so right now, with the potential that Tyler Shuck becomes the starting quarterback, I think history tells you that those two things typically don't go well together in terms of having a Coach of the year. And that, now history can always change. History always changes. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a said and done deal, but I just think that it's a lot right now for Kellen Moore to go in to this season and walk out as Coach of the Year. Not saying that it's impossible, but I think it's a really, really tough task for him to pull that off. Going from worst to first in the NFC South is not going to be an easy thing to do. Winning 10 plus games is not going to be an easy thing for this team to do. This team is still trying to figure out who it is. He was still trying to figure out who its quarterback is. And I think that all of that kind of creates a bit of a tough situation and a tough season this year for 2025, but an opportunity for a trajectory towards a Coach of the Year trajectory at a later point. I just don't see Kellen Moore being in that conversation this year right off the bat. If I'm being sorry to be the party pooper today, it's okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I just
sorry.
Just not going to call on you the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Poo-poo on those picks.
Lance, are you more of a John or a Ross in this situation?
Rose.
Let's go.
We're being realistic here. The question was, what does Kellen Moore have to do?
Correct. Well, and look,
that was your question. My question was, Ross, what do you think? And so I just said what I thought.
So it's Dylon's fault. Okay, cool.
Yeah, the great part about being interviewed is you get to answer whatever questions you do or don't want to answer. So, and look, Dylan, you brought up Sean Payton, right? In 2006, that scenario was not a worst to first scenario. That was a worst to NFC championship scenario.
Right.
Like,
true.
And I was on both the 2005 team, the Katrina Saints, when we were 3-13, and a win felt like the greatest thing in the world because there wasn't a whole lot of them, to Sean Payton the next year, the dome reopening, 10-6 season, number 2 seed in the playoffs, and obviously losing at Chicago in the NFC Championship game. That was a lot, right? And I don't know that it necessarily has to be that, right? Like, from a 5-win season to the NFC Championship game, potentially to the Super Bowl this year. And I honestly don't even know that you have to go from worst to first. I think making it to the playoffs, even as a wild card, would make him an incredible candidate for Coach of the Year, considering all that's going on, or all that has gone on in that building a little bit before and since he's been hired as the head coach. The quarterback situation with Derek Carr, the new quarterback, the draft class, the not signing a ton of big time free agent guys. Like, the expectation level for this team is very, very low. And I think a team that has it's generally the teams that aren't very good that end up having the Coach of the Year, right? We're not talking about Andy Reid. We're not talking about a bunch of these coaches that have sustained success as coaches of the year, even though they probably could be coaches of the year every single year because they're doing such a great job, right? So he's checked off one box. The expectation box is already checked off. The new coaching thing, I think kind of adds a little bit of momentum if he's a good coach and they're winning games. Oh, not only is this guy doing a great job, but he's brand new. He hasn't done this before. That adds a little bit more momentum to that. But I just don't see the amount of wins necessary that it's going to take. I would love for it to happen, right? Like just like the rest of us. And I do see there being potential for him to be a candidate or a serious candidate for Coach of the Year down the line. I just don't see that in year one because I think it's going to be tough sledding. Getting the necessary wins to make it to the playoffs. Because I don't see 8 wins making it to the playoffs. Even 9 is going to be tough to make it to the playoffs. Now if the division is down for whatever reason and the Saints somehow mess around and win the division with 9 wins, I think he's definitely catapulted up because they won the division. I just don't think 9 wins is going to win this division this year. I think Tampa Bay and Atlanta, I think they're just shoulders above the rest of us. And I would love for it to happen. Like, let me say that first, but I just don't see it.
No. To your point,
road, right? Tampa is the team to beat. They are the standard. Yeah. Tampa is the standard.
Yeah. To your point, you know who has twice as long odds to win Coach of the Year as Kellen Moore on FanDuel? John Harbaugh, Nick Sirianni, Andy Reid, and all of them. It's just like it's just not going to happen.
No.
So
it's almost like comeback Coach of the Year, almost is really what it is, right? Like it's the coach that brings the team back to something more than is actually the best coach in the league.
Right.
Well, I just think the standard for those guys is so high. What is it going to take? They're going to have to go undefeated, right? Like that's literally the only way that one of those guys is going to win. And since it has not happened, but one time ever, they know they can set those odds at whatever the heck they want because it's just not going to happen. The parity's too good. There's too much going on in the NFL. The season is too long now. Give as many reasons as you want. It just isn't going to happen.
Even Todd Bowles is plus 5,000. They're like, if you have to play the NFC South twice a year, you're probably gonna be good. Is it bad that I still get annoyed every time I think about the Chicago Bears because of that 2006 NFC Championship loss? I think one of my earliest sports memories.
You know what? That's to me, making it to that game was a major win. Right. Like we were a good team. I just think we were a little bit early. And even like the next couple of years, 07 and 08, it's kind of struggle bus, like 7-9 in 07, 8-8 in 2008. I still feel like 2009, we were a year or maybe even 2 years early. So losing in 2010 to Seattle, to Seattle after we smoked them during the regular season. We had to go out there, right? They had a 7-9 record, but they won their division. We came in second in the NFC South and went out there and ended up laying an egg and getting whooped. And then 2011 to me is just the most frustrating loss ever, losing at Seattle because I mean, we've talked about it on the show. I just feel like that was the best Saints team ever. And for us to not win a Super Bowl and win another Super Bowl in that kind of time frame, that's the one that just really, really gets under my skin. Like I just still can't believe it.
Yeah. Well, in 2010, y'all were banged up too. Like, I mean, y'all had Liddell Betts and Julius Jones running backs, and Reggie, I think, was playing hurt too. Like, I mean, y'all were. I'm not making excuses, but it was tough. I mean, it was an ideal situation for upset, I guess. But
no, especially for a playoff game. It's like it's one thing to have a bunch of guys banged up and basically a whole position group kind of replaced for a game, like a regular season game, but to have to go, okay, win or go home, with not necessarily your guys, it's tough, man. That's unfortunate.
Well, we're gonna go from Kellen Moore to the players that Kellen Moore is going to be trying to coach into winning him Coach of the Year. Coming up next with some players to root for coming up in training camp. Have you ever decided that at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. I've gotten a text right before game day that I needed to get 4 tickets for people to a game, and I think I started seeing those ghosts that Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold would be looking at. Thankfully, Game Time helps me get even cheaper tickets than if I got them earlier in the week. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Jump back into it. We are going to jump into training camp, some feel good, some players we think that fans should be rooting for. Let's start with Ross. Who's a player that fans should be rooting for this year?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a guy that I think is a good story. John and I were I'm going with third round safety Jonas Sanker.
Okay.
John and I were in the Saints facility for the draft, and as we were in kind of like the big meeting room, we had the draft was on like a couple of televisions over there, remember? And they were playing sort of this feature about Jonas Sanker and his life being somebody that was, German born and then moved around and doing all this other stuff. But then they got into a little bit of the conversation about Jonas Sanker's father, George Sanker, who's right now living with early onset Alzheimer's. And a big part of the reason that Jonas Sanker, who's I believe the oldest of his siblings, chose to go to Virginia was to stay close to home and kind of be able to help in those situations, things like that. But going to University of Virginia also, put him in a situation where he was there when there was the shooting at Virginia and he lost a friend during that time. Like it was just a lot. Like this guy's story, he's experienced a lot more than your typical, first year rookie guy. And I think that's actually true to be said about a lot of the players around the NFL. We just don't always hear the stories. But Jonas Sanker is the guy that's like incredibly mature, that had to grow up very, very quickly, that has navigated a lot of adversity in his life and is also really fun to watch on the football field and a pretty solid football player. And so like a player that you can both be excited about from the on-field perspective, but also somebody that just has a heck of a story. And that is the kind of person that you should really feel good about rooting for and like sharing that success in a way as a fan. I just think that he's kind of got all of those angles covered and everything like that as somebody that's absolutely worth rooting for throughout training camp as a Saints fan.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I personally am a huge fan of Jonas Sanker's game. I'm just so excited to see how he's going to be used. I hope it's not one of those situations where you look at a guy in college and you're like, man, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And then they just like pigeonhole him into one thing. Because I feel like there's the potential for that to happen, but he just is such a fun and versatile piece that it would feel like a shame for him to lose a bit of that shine. But of course, the first step to that, to him being used right, is training camp. So I'm excited to see how he stands out as a rookie.
Yeah. And I think to what you were saying about using him the right way, I think this is what comes into play when you have guys like Terry Joseph in the room and Peter Sermon or, Bo Davis, like you get in some of the college feel, because I just feel like that's going to help this team a little bit, especially on defense. And Brendan Staley's a defensive back guy. So I would be very shocked if they don't know how to use him the right way. Just like with Tyron or with Alante. I mean, I feel like you've got the right coaching, because Terry Joseph, I mean, dude, that's one I'm really excited about. Scary Terry, like he's coming to play, you know what I mean? And so I just feel like those guys, if it was last year, I think they would get some good things out of them, but I just don't know if they can necessarily unlock them like I feel like this coaching staff can do this year.
Yeah. He's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. I can't wait.
Yes.
John, who are you rooting for this year? Or who do you think fans should be rooting for this year?
I'm going to go with stick with the draft, and I'm going to go with Devin Neal. I believe that when you look at this running back room, tremendous opportunity. Kendre Miller, you're not sure what's going to happen when there. They pick up Cam Akers late in the process, and look, it's anybody's guess who's going to be running back 2, 3, and 4 if they keep that many and such. And so I believe when you look at Devin Neal, a guy who single-handedly carried Kansas's program on his back, a lot of experience. Some people look at that as a bad thing. Some people look at it as a good thing. I mean, again, you probably lie somewhere in the middle, but he's beat Texas single-handedly. He's done a lot of different things for Kansas's program. A really a blue-collar type of guy, somebody who's going to come into work every day and be a sponge. And one of the things I most appreciated about him when I talked to his coaches, I talked to his running backs coach and I talked to his head coach. Before he even got to rookie camp, he reached out to his running backs coach and said, look, hey, I want to make sure I hit the ground running. Can we get together and go work on some stuff? And I just feel like that initiative, I know some players maybe want to take a little bit back, step back, kind of soak up some of the stuff. His guy was all about coming into work. And so I feel like him as a player under this particular offensive system is he could end up being one of those guys where you look like you've seen some guys back in the preseason who hit the ground running like a Darius Victor. Some people remember
Tony Jones Jr.
Tony Jones Jr. So some of these guys who had the really good preseason, but they kind of came out of nowhere. But I think Devin Neal has that thing where they know what Devin Neal can do and that he's going to be able to deliver in training camp and preseason. And I believe that he's going to end up being one of those guys without a Taysom Hill in the picture. I'm not so sure that he might not finish behind AK in rushing this season. So he's an easy guy to get behind. Great personable person, very good head on his shoulders. Just can't say enough good things about him. Everybody you talk to, this guy is a genuine art.
Yeah, he's been awesome. The thing about the experience side of it too is like he's got 4 years of experience, 3 straight years of 1,000 yards rushing, but he only averaged 190 carries over the course of his entire collegiate career. So he's got a lot of experience, but even that little bit of the downside of the experience, he's still got a lot of tread on the tires too, everything like that. And he's durable, which I think is something that position group needs a lot of.
A little bit.
Lance. Who should fans be rooting for?
We already know.
Well, I don't know if you know because I just figured it out about 2 minutes ago.
If he says anybody else than who I'm thinking of, I'm going to be really upset.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be a shoe-in for you. I'm excited to see
let's
you.
See now I'm listening.
Well, look, I'm first of all, Dylan, I'm glad that you didn't pick me to go first in this segment because I wasn't ready. Second of all, I'm glad you didn't pick me to go after Ross because Ross had he went full journalist on us and did a full breakdown.
I was like, dang, did I ruin the mood a little bit? I hope
no, it's a great answer.
I was like, wow, I'm learning a whole lot about this guy.
Man, I'm rooting for Jonas Anchor now.
There we go.
Exactly. Well, Ross, job well done. John, you as well. I wanted to go Danny Stutzman, clearly. I wanted to go and outside of the box and say both quarterbacks. But sure. the undraftedness in me is something that never leaves, right? I played a long time in the league. And honestly, I wanted to go with a rookie, but I decided not to. And I'm going to go with Mason Tipton, a second-year player, obviously undrafted, a guy that showed tremendous potential last offseason and into training camp, had the hamstring injury that really he just never could quite get over the hump last year. Made a few plays in the season, but there was not really even a consistent player on the field for the team. Right. But I think that he adds something to this receiver core that I don't think the top 3 or 4, maybe even 5, if we look at it today, possess. And that's the unique ability in the slot to create consistent separation and make plays. Like we have guys that can go in there and do it from time to time, but I just don't think we have the consistency in that spot that I think we're going to need to be a really, really good offense. Sure, we could put running backs in there. We could put AK in there. We can put tight ends, Jawan and those guys, but I don't see Brandon Cooks going inside and being a full-time slot guy. Winning those third and mediums consistently. Not saying he can't do it, right? But that's not been his role in the first 11 years of his career. So I don't know that you necessarily plug him in there in year 12 and say, okay, now you're a slot receiver, right? Like that's just not generally what happens. And to your point earlier, Dylan, or maybe it was Ross, talking about, guys being pigeonholed, right? The really, really good coaches in all sports are coaches that allow their players to do what it is that they do best, right? And not trying to change guys into something that they're not. I wouldn't advise putting anybody in the slot that has not really ever been in the slot too much before. Now, that has to start from somewhere. Eventually a guy's going to go from no reps to a lot of reps. But if somebody's got the what it takes, the chops to be able to get in there and be that type of player, I think then you've got to give him that opportunity to go in there and do that. And, just being healthy first and foremost is what I'm going to root for Mason Tipton first, right? So we can see the best of him in training camp, because there is opportunity there. I know that the top three guys, I guess, in essence, are pretty solidified as far as guys that are going to be on the team. But we don't know how that rep distribution is going to be come the season. We don't know what guys are going to play what specific roles, I guess, right away. So I think there is opportunity, not just in the slot, but opportunity for some of the younger receivers to step in and carve out a role for themselves. And like I said before, I mean, I have a soft spot for the undrafted guys, and specifically the undrafted wide receivers. And it's not a label that ever leaves you, right? I play over a decade, and I always heard about being an undrafted guy. Like, it just is a thing. Even more so than guys that are 5th or 6th or 4th round draft picks, right? You might hear first rounder more than you hear undrafted, but maybe not even. So, definitely want to see him go out there healthy, do his thing. And hopefully we get the best of him going into this 2025 season.
Love that.
Yeah, I love that. And again, that's another guy that I think it's, it's easy to root for, the underdog. There's an opening in the wide receiver room. Like, I think that's a solid choice. And I'm going to go with a guy in another room that I think has some open competition, and another former undrafted guy. It wasn't a guy that was signed by the Saints as an undrafted free agent, but it's a guy who still hasn't gotten, I think, a real shot in the NFL that I think could break out, and I'm waiting for breaking out. And that's Rajon Wright. Shout out to Last Chance Use Own. I think that's a small tool guy who's undrafted, but I think has always had the potential to break out. Easy to root for, personality, and I just think that if there's a guy I'm looking at to break out and stand out in training camp in the latter half of the cornerback room, I think Rajon Wright is an easy guy to stand out. What Ross or John, either of y'all can say, what have y'all seen from him in training camp in the past, or mini camp in the past, that stands out?
Yeah, Ross talked about how in preseason. No, I just say a guy cuts his teeth, and I mean, the way onto the roster is going to be special teams for sure, but it just plays with a certain edge, and again, chip on his shoulder, if you will, and just somebody who I think performed well in the preseason. The injuries, that's what slowed him down. If he didn't get injured, I don't know, Ross, he might have made the team over Rico Payton. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
he might have. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it was pretty neck and neck, because you talk to Darren Rizzi and Phil Galliano, they love both of those guys. And Rajon, again, he's a guy that I think learns a lot more in the process now in the training camp room and being around some of those older guys. And he has a huge opportunity in front of him. But again, another guy who's just kind of down to earth, but also is very aware, if that makes any sense. But, I think he's got a lot of good things to offer this football team. And he's one of those guys that you just need to know who he is ahead of time. So you're not like, who's this guy in training camp or in preseason? Like, pay attention.
Yeah, no, he'll show up. I think it was like a 40% completion percentage when he was the closest defender when he was targeted during the preseason last year, up until that injury. And John and I talked to him in the locker room after the injury because we saw him in the locker room. I think it was maybe about a week. I think it was like going into that first week of the regular season or something like that. And you could just kind of, he just talked about how much of like, yeah, it's disappointing, but look, this is an opportunity. He now kind of gets to sit back. He gets to be a part of this organization as he continues to move forward. He's grateful that he gets to still be there. And also just kind of had the right attitude about it. Like that's a tough situation to go through when you're trying to battle your way onto a roster and then an injury gets in your way, something completely out of your control. And I think one of his best qualities on the field that he's already shown so far throughout OTAs and minicamp is his short memory. He ended up getting burned at one point during one of the OTAs by Donovan Peoples-Jones for a big completion down the left sideline. And then I think it was the very next play he comes back, or at least it was the last rep of the drills that they were running. And he ends up picking off, I think it was Tyler Shuck. He ends up undercutting the route, just kind of running the route for the receiver, getting underneath it, making this diving play for the football and everything. And so he had every opportunity at that point to kind of like wallow on that play that he had given up, right? It's tough, right? You're fighting for a roster spot, you're fighting for your future, all this other stuff. And he didn't let that get to him. And he comes back and he makes a play later on that very same series of reps and everything. And so I think that's one of probably his best qualities going in, his physical nature and then the short memory that he's got.
Yeah, I remember after that play, a lot of players kind of like, because you can see he really took that hard, getting beat in that. And you know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to get beat like that. You know what I mean? But a lot of players were telling him stuff is like, hey, man, walk it off, shake it off. Like, keep going. We don't do that here. Just different reactions and stuff for him based off of his reactions. I'm sorry. And so, again, that short-term memory and being able to do that against Tyler Shuck, that's the type of growth I like to see in training camp is the guys if like, yeah, you might get beat on a play, but how do you respond? And that's one of the things I loved about Alante, his first several years is like he might have gotten beat on one play or something, but he comes back and makes up for it on another one is you got to have short-term memory in the NFL. And if you linger on something, then it doesn't typically mean good things. It's play to play.
Right. Compounds quickly.
Yeah. Well, let's transition from battling it out in training camp to battling it out in the red zone as we find out who is going to lead the team in receiving touchdowns this season.
It's Tyler Shuck.
Well, John, I think, thinks that Clint Kubiak is still calling but he's not. But that'd be I think the worst case scenario. Leads the team in receiving touchdowns. No, let's start off with undrafted free agent wide receiver Lance Moore to see who do you think will lead the team in touchdowns this year.
Well, I would love for it to be me leading the team in touchdowns.
There you go. Yeah, Lance Moore is going to lead the team in receiving. Okay,
I'm coming back. You know what? It's like this is a complete guess because we don't know, and honestly, like not only do we not know, but we don't know who's going to play quarterback. We don't know what the receiver room is going to look like. We don't know what the depth of the tight end room is going to look like. We don't know how much AK is going to be involved in the passing game this year. So this is a 100% guess. But I want to say Jawan Johnson. And the reason I want to say that is because I don't see us just dropping back and chucking it a million times this year. That's kind of been where Rashid Shaheed has had most of his touchdowns. Chris Olave in his career, and Chris Olave in his career has had several in that vein, but again, has not had a single season with, I think his most touchdowns in the season was 5 or 6. So I just think that the tight end being young quarterback's best friend, I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity for Jawan to work in the red zone this season. I almost said AK because I feel like he's going to be heavily involved in the passing game. And I feel like I feel like Kellen Moore would be foolish to not use AK as much as humanly possible in the passing game, because I think he's so dynamic with the ball in his hands. Getting him the ball in space is going to be incredible for this offense, I feel. But I just don't know how many of those touches he'll get in the red zone. I feel like the tight end being an outlet, being a really big bodied guy that can go up and get balls over the top of the defenders. I mean, I just, for whatever reason, I feel like Juwan is going to be a heavy part of this offense. And I think part of that as well is not having Taysom Hill to be another guy that requires touches as we get closer to the red zone. I think this could be, you know, potentially a 10 touchdown season for Juwan, and that would be, I think that will lead the team. And you know, I guess the jury is still out, but that's where my mind went for whatever reason initially once I first read the question when you sent it yesterday, Dylan.
Yeah, I like that. I like that pick a lot. I'm gonna go with someone I think should lead the team in receiving touchdowns, and I think that comes from like a game planning, himself stepping up into more of a red zone threat. It's something I think that I know listening to Ross for years as I've been waiting for. And I think they need to get Chris Olave more involved in the red zone. Just a little bit more creative usage of him in the red zone, more than just waiting for him to make the big catch and run it back. You know, I think that there are some old Michael Thomas routes that I think Chris Olave could run and be successful with, maybe after the catch, short yardage plays. I just think that there is way more opportunity than we have seen in the past of getting Chris Olave involved down there creatively. And I think the good news is that, not to shock you, I think Kellen Moore will be able to get more out of him than Clint Kubiak or Pete Carmichael did in the past. So I just think that there's way more opportunity than has been taken on in the past with Chris Olave. And I think that is another way that he can. We've talked a lot about this offseason of being like, all right, man, everyone knows you're talented. Now's your time to prove it. And I think that taking that step up, being more of a touchdown guy is a better way. You know, I mean, getting 5 or 6 touchdowns a year your first couple of years in the NFL, that's not easy to do. That's a good it's a good early thing. But now let's see, 8 or 9, 10. Let's see what you can do in your asked to score specifically more. How can you become open in the red zone? Because the Saints are going to need people to be open in the red zone, especially, they still haven't, brought in the crazy splash, big play, big body, go up and get it guy. They're going to need to either have one of the guys near the bottom of the depth chart step up to be in that role, or a guy like Chris Olave to be like, you know what, I'm going to put the onus on myself. I'm going to get more open. I'm going to create better opportunities for myself if I'm given the opportunity by the play call.
Yeah. And I think putting him in more positions to kind of a la like ladder Drew Brees era, attacking the front pylon as opposed to fade, back of the end zone, back of the end zone, back of the end zone. I think even just that little bit, like you were talking about the Michael Thomas routes, like a lot of his stuff targeted like the front pylon in the red zone or kind of in that within 10-yard area. Giving him those opportunities to do that. I think it was like his rookie season. I think there was a pivot route that he ran in college that he like recommended to the team when he showed up. He was like, hey, I can run this and I can run it really well. And then they utilized it soon after, and they utilized it like early on in the season. I think maybe it was Cody Burns that helped to no, it was Ronald Curry. Ronald Curry.
Yeah. RC was first.
Yeah. He was the one that kind of like, said, hey, we should use that here in this situation. And they went out there and they ran it. They scored a touchdown with it. Like, it was all those little things. And so more of that for Chris Olave. You're right. He should be the guy to lead this team in touchdowns. But I think more of those red zone opportunities that suit what he does well, I think would be like, that's a game changer for him.
Well, and Dylan, you brought up game plan. I mean, that to me is the underrated piece here. It's because the football is coached in situations, right? And as you get closer into the red zone and then down into the tight red, it's not like coaches are just looking at their play sheet and calling plays. They're calling plays that are specific to each different situation or scenario. And if Chris or Juwan or anybody is not game planned into those plays, that doesn't mean they're not in or on the field in those plays. It just means that they're not the primary or maybe even the secondary target in those plays, then generally they're not going to get the football. Things happen faster as you get closer to the goal line. And it's not, you're not necessarily getting through a full progression if you're at the 4-yard line trying to throw the football for a touchdown. So the game plan piece is extremely important. It doesn't mean that those guys don't have the ability. It just means that they have not gotten the opportunity for whatever reason. And that was like, and I can say that from personal experience. Like, once we got into third downs in my day, once we got into the fringe red and into the red zone, my role spiked. Like, my usage spiked. Like, that was kind of my role, right? Like, that was when they wanted me in the game. That was when they wanted me to get targeted more than on first and second downs. We just had a touchback and we got the ball at the 20-yard line, taking the field, right? Like, that wasn't a big part of my role. And so being able to give guys that role in this 2025 offense will say a whole lot as to who they want to, to see, get the opportunity, and then potentially have success.
Yeah. John, who do you think is going to lead the team in touchdowns this year?
Yeah, I think Juwan's a solid answer. I'm going to go with, though, the veteran man. I'm going to go with B. Cooks. I think Brandon Cooks is going to end up being the guy. And look, maybe I'm higher on Brandon Cooks. If you go back to the last episode, I had a lot to say about Brandon Cooks too. I just feel like I'm higher on him maybe than some people are. And look, you're talking about a guy who had problems last year, injuries. Again, it's not necessarily his fault, right? But the year before that, he had 8 touchdowns with the Cowboys. He could still do a lot of things. And if you look at the Eagles last year, again, they're going to bring in a lot of different elements from every offense that Kellen Moore had been a part of. But Devontae Smith had 8 touchdowns and led the way. And then A.J. Brown was 7. And if you look at Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley, they only had 2 apiece. Now, granted, they were a great running team, so that obviously speaks for that. But again, I think Cooks is a guy that when you look at his veteran leadership, his veteran experience, the fact that he can run all the different routes on the field, I think you could put him in multiple different positions. He's still strong and effective after the catch. And again, you look at this RPO type of offense that the Saints are going to run. I feel like it gives somebody like a Brandon Cooks, similar to like a Rashid Shaheed, I think it gives him the best opportunity to be the best version of himself. And so, again, I think that when you're looking at solutions across the field, red zone, if I'm Tyler Shuck, if I'm Spencer Rattler, that's one of the guys that I'm looking for first. Nothing wrong with Chris Olave, nothing wrong with Juwan Johnson, but I feel like Brandon Cooks would be one of my top options to look for on the field, because he's going to be where you need him to be as long as you're working on that chemistry stuff. But again, I love the fact that even recently, like even bringing everybody together, just do some work. I feel like that matters. And I feel like Brandon Cooks is a way different place, obviously, than when he first got to New Orleans. But again, I think when it's all said and done, the old men, and maybe I'm just partial because I am old, but the older guys leading the way for this team, I feel like that's going to be the way that this team kind of rebounds, is they need to be led by some of these guys and getting some of the contributions from the younger ones, obviously, but they need to be the ones that kind of step up here and help.
Yeah. Ross,
Dig it.
Who's your pick?
Yeah, I had my guy coming in, and then Lance said it, and I'm gonna stick with it. I'm gonna agree with Lance. I think it's Juwan Johnson. I was wondering, like, should I change my answer to give a fourth opinion, everything like that? But like Juwan just feels like the right answer to me, and so I'm not gonna change it. I'm gonna give three reasons. I think you're right, though, Dylan, that Chris Olave should lead this team, but I'm calling that Juwan Johnson will lead the team in touchdowns. And I think the 3 big reasons are, 1, he'll be early in the progression when it comes to the red zone snaps. Like Lance said, that is a huge piece of it because you're not going to get all the way through. The other thing to me is that Alvin Kamara, if Taysom Hill is going to be out for a little while, I feel like Alvin Kamara and his usage in the red zone is going to go back to him being able to be utilized as a rusher in the red zone, running in the red zone, really, really important. So I feel like that becomes his role. And then the other thing for me, and kind of the final piece, is young quarterbacks, tight end. It's a very comfortable situation. And Juwan's one of their better yards after catch, pass catchers actually on the roster. And so I think that even just being able to, on a red zone rep from the 13-yard line, dumping something off to him six yards over the middle of the field, he has the ability to turn up and go and get the rest of those yards and potentially find his way into the end zone. So I just think that between game plan, between what the usage of the other players around him is going to be, and in the opportunity that should be allotted to him in those red zone opportunities. And I guess actually I'll add one more thing too: contract. You got to make the contract worth it. So you might as well get him the touchdowns, right? And so I think that like all of these things come together in their own ways, varying degrees, that would eventually lead to Juwan Johnson being only the second tight end under Kellen Moore to lead Kellen Moore's offense in touchdowns. The last one to do it was Dalton Schultz. He actually tied with Amari Cooper with 8. I think that was in 2021, if I remember correctly. So I'm going to go with Juwan. He feels like the most likely one.
I like it. Well, let's go over to someone that might have a chance to lead the team in defensive touchdowns if everything goes his way. You don't need a lot to win. Don't need a lot to win that one, I don't think. Closing us out today, we're going to go back to what we've been doing, going through, giving each player some season previews, highlighting what it's going to be like for them this year, what they need to do coming up. And let's go over to someone we've talked a lot about in the past couple weeks, and that's rookie cornerback Quincy Riley. It's someone I like a lot to make an impact this year. And let's start off with Lance. What do you think about Quincy Riley heading into this year? What does he need to do to earn some playing time and stand out as a rookie?
Well, first and foremost, he's going to have to stay healthy. Coming into the offseason, or I guess post-draft, not being able to be ready to suit up and to practice like that isn't the biggest of deals, right? Because it was an injury he had previously. It wasn't like he got in the building, got hurt, and then was out the entire offseason. But I think his health is going to be paramount. I do believe that there's going to be opportunity in that cornerback room for somebody or somebodies to step up and to carve out a role for themselves. I don't know necessarily that it's going to be day one starter. But I do think, being drafted and you're a defensive back, you have to find your way onto the field on special teams first. I think that's going to have to be initially what he does. Your DBs have to play on special teams. Like, there's no way around that. Like, occasionally there's a receiver that's on your active roster that doesn't play special teams. Obviously, offensive linemen are backups and they don't play special teams. Defensive backs have to, right? Like, there's just not enough numbers on active game day rosters. We've talked about that before. So the DBs have to do that. And generally, there's a number of different ways that a defensive back can get onto the field, right? You could be a guy that is a standout special teams guy that makes plays time and time again. And then they're like, maybe we need to see this guy on defense a little bit to see if he can do that as well. Or you're a guy that is literally killing it in practice, like as far as against the first team offense. So like a practice squad type rep thing where that defensive back is just locking down your receivers, whether it's your number 1 guy, 2 guy, 3 guy. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You get a guy that's showing consistently that he can hold his, not just hold his own, but he can make plays a bit against the good offense, like the starting offense. That's another way. Or he's a guy that just balls out in preseason games, right? And then they're like, well, shoot, like not only is this guy gonna make our team, but he's a guy that could be playing for us. And then obviously it's injury, right? Some unfortunate injury happens to a guy that's ahead of him on the depth chart. Then potentially he can move up and be a guy that's getting those starter type reps. But outside of Alante and Kool-Aid, I wouldn't say that third cornerback position is unattainable. I just think he's going to have to work for it. He's going to have to prove that he's ready for it. I don't think it's a scenario that they say, oh, we drafted him this year, we're going to put him out there, he's going to be our third corner. I think he's going to have to do a lot of what he did in college. The physical, the competitive, the ball skills. I think we're going to have to see all of that. But I do think he's going to end up playing. I don't know. I can't sit here today and say, oh yeah, he's going to be the starting third cornerback. But I do feel like they see enough in him to know that he's a guy that's going to have to get some reps, and they're going to want to see what they really, really have in him, or else you wouldn't have drafted him, right? Like I just feel like he's got the ability. He's got what I think Brandon Staley is looking for in a starting cornerback, as far as his competitiveness, his ball skills, his toughness, and you know, the jury is still out clearly, but health first, and then, you know, got to see him in the practice scenario, then following that in the preseason games to see what his potential is for sure.
Right.
Yeah. I like that. Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Quincy Riley is a threat to be a rookie starter. I don't know if that necessarily means first, week one or anything like that. But, like Lance laid out, like there's a lot of different pathways to getting there. He's the guy that had the most interceptions in this year's class of incoming cornerbacks. He's got a really physical play style. He's incredibly fundamental. Like he understands how to work through phase, how to transition, all these other things he does. He leans on his fundamentals more than he leans on his natural talent, which is kind of like a coach's dream, right? I can coach you in your fundamentals, your natural talent. I can't coach that. I can't teach that. But as a coach working with a player that is, willing to learn the fundamentals, willing to learn kind of the basics, everything like that, and kind of always go back to that and rely on that as kind of the basis or foundation of their game, then I think that ends up putting him in a solid position. So I think that that's something that will speak to his favor too. He knows what to do with the football in his hand. He had over 400 return yards in terms of career interception return yards. And everyone else in this class was around like 240 or so. So he's got this really uncanny ability with the ball in his hands that might even give him more special teams opportunity potentially as well. And so I just think that he's one of those players that once he's healthy and once he's caught up, because now I would consider him a little bit behind in terms of the on-field product of what he's got to show and prove and all those other pieces. But if he can kind of close that gap and then do what it is that he has done as a ball hawk and a physical player, someone that's willing to get involved in the run game, that's willing to be physical, then I think all of that ends up kind of pushing him and pushing his conversation, or pushing the conversation around his name potentially a bit further for that coaching staff that might be looking to, just always try to get the best starting secondary, just like you try to get the best offensive line, so on and so forth, out on the field. Because I think he can eventually push himself into that conversation, even if it's not training camp or week one. He's got the talent to do it.
Yeah, I like that. John.
John?
What do you think?
I know we look
John.
So that's okay.
Rajon.
That's a completely different person. That's a completely different person that is not to be brought up on this show.
Man, oh man.
John, what do you think?
All right.
Who do you think?
I think Quincy Riley's. I agree with everybody. What everybody has said. I think his outlook is going to be determined whether or not they bring in somebody like Asante Samuel Jr. I think if he does that, then it might be telling a little bit about the secondary and the cornerback room. I think Quincy Riley starting off with a little bit of injury stuff is a little concerning. And obviously there's concerns there with Asante Samuel Jr., but he's going to get checked out and such. But again, look, I think Quincy Riley could end up being cornerback 3. I know they brought in Ike Yadam too. I think he can play corner, but I don't think they brought him in to be cornerback 3 necessarily. I think they like his special teams and the fact that he does offer that ability to play on the outside if they do need him as well. But look, Quincy Riley, he can play zone. He can play man. He played a lot of zone in Louisville. I remember he told us that he played a lot of match coverage, which ended up turning into man when he was playing at Louisville. So I don't doubt the fit. I don't doubt the scheme. I don't doubt the ball skills. I think it's, again, just like the Saints team, it's availability. And since you had to start from behind the 8 ball, can you now make up a lot of that at training camp and then be able to turn what you've been able to obviously observe at practice and then come onto the field and be able to put that into play? And so I feel like when it's all said and done, if we get into week 10, we talk about the quarterback position and stuff. Is it the same guy? He could be a starter in week 10, and you know what I mean? Just depending on what happens with the Saints and their health and such. But I like the outlook and trajectory of a Quincy Riley. I believe he's got the ball hawk skills coupled with the technique. I'd say Kool-Aid's very technically sound. I think Quincy Riley is also very technically sound, and you get two of those guys paired up and letting Alante do his thing. I think it means good things for the Saints secondary, at least on paper. Now they got to play the games. I think I'm way higher on Kool-Aid than a lot of people in our, when you look at the Saints cornerback room. But again, I feel like for Quincy Riley, when it's all said and done, he could be a very, very good special player. Maybe somewhat like a Paulson Adebo, you know what I mean? Because I think if we look at Paulson, who's drafted in the third round. I mean, Quincy Riley drafted a little bit later, obviously. And so not many people knew a lot about Paulson Adebo, and he ended up getting thrust into those kind of situations. And I mean, they already had Marshawn Lattimore and some other options there, but I think it's kind of a similar path for Quincy Riley.
Speaking of the Paulson Adebo Quincy Riley comparison, Quincy Riley not flagged in his last 23 games in college. No flags.
That's crazy.
And now,
crazy.
How much does that change when you get into the NFL? You're playing a different style, right? You're going up against guys that are a lot faster, a lot stronger, all that. Like, that doesn't mean that that's going to carry over. But if that's something that carries over, I think that's another one of those things that maybe, gives him a little bit of an edge and maybe a little bit of a refresh, that number 29 number in relation to yellow flags, right? I think Paulson got flagged egregiously a few too many times, but okay, I was gonna say I might be alone in that. But
you're not.
So I'm curious, like Quincy Riley having sort of that clean, record, if you will, when it comes to penalties over the course of those 23 games. Does that change all of a sudden when he's in a Saints uniform? Like, I don't know. I don't know like what the officiating situation is with all that, but I'll digress from there.
It's something that gets brought up in the NBA a lot with like I hear other players talk about with like Alex Caruso. He had the people talked about him being a defensive guy early on in his career as a rookie. So now he has the reputation to where he is not really called for fouls anymore because people just think he's a good. So did that happen with Adebo? Could that happen with Quincy Riley? Hopefully not.
Sounds like we need to start always pushing that Quincy Riley hasn't been flagged in 23 games. That way he develops the reputation of being a clean defender, and then there we go. We've assisted in a situation.
I like that. State Squad show, changing the game.
Controlling the narrative.
Controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
John, what do you think about Riley's fit specifically in the Brandon Staley defense?
Well, I mean, short answer is he fits. I mean, he does a lot of what he's going to want. I mean, but I think that when you look at how this defense comes together, I would probably say that when Alante goes in the slot, if you're putting Quincy Riley on the outside, being that he's more familiar with his own, maybe playing a little bit more off the ball and put Kool-Aid more closer to the ball is probably where I might look at him. But again, it depends on who he's going to play up against, right? You're talking about, is he going to go up against a Mike Evans? I don't know. I'd probably put Kool-Aid on Mike Evans. Is he going to play one side of the field? I think that's another question to be determined too, right? Because I think when they had when they had Marshawn Lattimore, they left him on an island. Like, they literally said Marshawn can take away half of the field. That's how good Marshawn was when he was playing, and they're not worried about it. So I wonder, when they put him in there, do they give him additional safety help? If is Justin Reed coming over the top or a Tyrann Mathieu? I think that's the things to decide on is, can you leave him on an island, or do you need to give him some help? And I think that's what is yet to be determined for him. But generally, to answer your question, I think it's playing a little bit off the receiver a little bit, and then just seeing if you need the extra help, because I think he can close really quickly. I think he can recover pretty quickly. And so I think those are the two elements that you want to do. But Kool-Aid, I feel like you're going to put him closer to the receiver, have him try to jam him up, and then kind of work from there.
Yeah. Lance, did you ever get excited whenever you saw a rookie cornerback line up against you?
Sure. But I would even say that it wasn't necessarily excitement. It was almost like, this is disrespectful, like after I got to a certain, level, You know, like, and really, you know, you can't control who's in the game, or you can't control who's across from you in practice. But there did become a point. I don't remember what year it was, maybe 2011, when the receiver coach CJ Curtis Johnson used to be like, "Man, stop going with them. Like, it's not, you're not getting any better going with them." And that's not to say that there's no rookies that aren't, you know, on my level or anything like that. But in the one-on-one setting, it was just a little bit too easy for me. And so I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, like I'll back out of this rep, and I'll wait for that one of those two guys over there to come in, and I'll, you know, iron sharpens iron type of thing.
Right.
So yes, I guess I got excited, but then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not getting too much better going against this guy. You know?
Well, if you're worried about getting better, I know what you can do to get better, and that is listening to us every Monday and Thursday. So thank you for listening to the Saints Squad show today. Check out me, Ross, John, and Lance on our socials for the latest. We'll be right back here on Thursday to talk more Saints football. Until then, be sure to make Locked On Saints your second listen of the day.